Thank you, everybody, for joining us here at OriginClear's channel. Just want to let you all know what we're going to be doing with this interview series here. We're going to be going through company updates and industry updates, answering any questions you guys have for us. If you have any, don't be shy, and please send them over, and we will, of course, be introducing members of the team. So who better to kick us off for video number one than Chief Executive Officer, Chairman of the Board, Riggs Eckelberry. Riggs, how are you doing today?
Michael, I'm great. Thank you very much. And since the hurricane passes by, we're super happy.
Good. Glad to hear you're in the clear down there in Florida, Riggs. And what I really want to do is get to know you a little bit and get the origin story of OriginClear, so to speak. So first and foremost, tell me about your past experience. What really makes you tick as a businessman?
Well, that's a really good question because I had an early career in the nonprofit space. First of all, I was raised internationally, so I have no home. Kind of like bummed about in the Caribbean and Europe. And, my dad was the Mad Men guy, like very, very typical 50s type exec. I got bit by the nonprofit bug, and as part of that, I actually became a merchant mariner, sailed the seven seas, all that good stuff. Finally, in the 80s, I got really fascinated by the potential for high tech to transform our society. And as you know, this is just when businesses were starting to move from the paper records to the computer records and so forth. And that's what I jumped into in New York in the 80s. And that was a learning experience. Try having 12 people with a payroll every 2 weeks in Manhattan. That was fun and different. But what I learned from that was that tech really is transformative. It makes big changes happen. Mm-hmm. And eventually, I gave away that business to my best salesman, and he's done a great job with it. I moved on to LA and ended up in the .com in the 90s, which was perfect for me. I loved the fact that you could use computers not just to calculate, but to communicate. And of course, we've seen that happen. The world is really communicating on the computer big time. And I had to learn so much during the .com, and I think started going up the ladder, so to speak. And by 2005, I was the number 2 of a company that was going on to the NASDAQ. It successfully did. Mm-hmm. But I saw that there were cracks in that company that could not be fixed. And I also felt like all number 2s that I could be a better number 1. So right. I spoke to a fund that I'd gotten to know, and they said, yeah, Riggs, you could be a CEO. But we're not doing tech anymore. We're doing green. And specifically, we think that algae is the next biofuel. And do you want to launch a company in the algae space? And I'm like, okay. In fact, I had a brother who had some intellectual property in the area. And we launched a company in the algae space. And I had so much fun with that. I was on all the top, mass media shows and so forth. And I was called Algae Man. It was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, fracking arrived. Cost of crude oil dropped below $50, and all of a sudden, algae was a science experiment. Mm-hmm. So I'm not accustomed to just giving up. So we pivoted, and our technology for extracting algae from water became a technology for extracting toxins, sewage, et cetera, from water. And that became the company that was eventually called OriginClear. Mm-hmm. And we then learned so much about the water industry because it's essentially unchangeable. It's very set in its ways. So basically what we learned, algae was like, who knew? It was brand new. There was no existing world of algae. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, water has been around for a couple hundred years. And it's very set in its ways, probably rightly so because of public health. But at the same time, we learned that it's very hard to change, and there's change needed in water. We've seen that happen all the time. Jackson, Mississippi, the water ran brown. Why? Well, it turns out that water infrastructure has been neglected at least since 1960, and it's gotten worse and worse. So we have a problem where the central infrastructure is decaying in this country. And In other countries, it's not at all. Like, look at India. There's like basically no infrastructure. So
Yeah.
there's a real problem with central infrastructure, and it won't be solved centrally, right? Definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different result. So the solution then is to unburden the central system with do-it-yourself water treatment by businesses and agriculture, who represent about 90% of all the demand.
You know what's really interesting, Riggs, and one of the reasons why I would like to dive deeper into this on the next video is water is, if not the most important thing, one of the top three most important things infrastructure wise for virtually any country to have any level of success in health at all, right? I mean, poor sanitation, poor access to water is one of the leading causes of death in almost any nation that doesn't have quality access to it. So I'm real curious to hear your thoughts deeper on related to ours falling apart, because that's not something I would like to see happen either. But pulling the conversation back to you for just the last little question here, Riggs. What is it like being the chief executive officer? What do you handle now that you're in that role?
Well, it's a really good question, because for a long time, I didn't have a good bench. It takes a while to build your crew. And, I've been around other execs and film directors, for example, who they took their crew with them, because that's the value. Once you have your team, that's the real asset. And so it took me really until 2018 to literally 10 years to finally get a team of top technologists, top managers, really great business development people, et cetera. And that's when my life turned to just a hectic, feed the fire, to, okay, we got something going on. I can actually breathe and think and get strategic. And that's the story for the last 4 years, what we've been doing.
Interesting. I've definitely heard that before. That it's obviously not just one person ruling the ship. It's a team of people. And I've also heard it described as, instead of it being a pyramid shaped top down thing, as the CEO, you're kind of the root of a bush, trying to enable everyone to grow as best they can in their respective areas.
It makes a lot of sense. Another way to look at it is a sort of a 360 look, where you're the hub and you're trying to reconcile the full 360-degree view of everything that's going on. And that can become a trap, or you can rise above it and have, a great view of all the competing needs and bring people to bear on the problems, so it's not always you.
Well said. Well, Riggs, this has been a great introduction to you. Thank you for coming on. Is there any last pieces of information about yourself you would like to share with people today before we go?
Well, of course, because of my background, I am an idealist, but I really feel that just giving won't solve problems. You have to find the actual solution, and usually it's technology. And with the technology comes the financial solution, which is why in the next interview, we'll discuss the fintech we came up with, which I believe is a major solution to this problem of degrading infrastructure.
Perfect. Well, Riggs, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you have any questions, don't be shy and please send them over. Riggs, thank you. Look forward to chatting again next time.
Can't wait, Michael. Thank you.